It was a quiet night, the kind of night when even the wind seems afraid to make a sound. Inside an old house, a 17-year-old boy sat alone in his study. The room smelled of old wood and forgotten pages, stacks of dusty books surrounding him like silent watchers. He turned a page, but his mind wasn't focused. There was a strange heaviness in the air, a feeling that something was wrong. And then, he heard it. A creak. Soft at first, almost like the house settling. But then it came again, louder, sharper, echoing down the hallway. He froze. The candle in his hand flickered, casting long, nervous shadows across the cracked wallpaper. His heart began to pound, each beat louder than the last. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. Step by step, he walked out of the study, his footsteps echoing as if someone else were following behind him. The corridor stretched ahead, long and narrow, with the faint smell of damp earth drifting through the air. That's when he noticed it. A door. A door he had never seen before. It was half hidden behind shelves covered in cobwebs, the wood blackened with age. He reached out with a trembling hand, brushing the webs aside. The handle was cold, colder than ice, biting into his skin. His breath quickened. Against his better judgment, he pushed. The door groaned open slowly, painfully, as if it hadn't been touched for decades. And the air that came out was heavy and foul, like something dead had been locked away inside. He stepped through, every nerve in his body screaming for him to stop. The room was small, forgotten, and full of decay. Torn curtains hung from rusted nails. Broken chairs lay scattered across the floor. And in the corner, a rocking chair moved by itself, back and forth, each creak echoing in the silence. His flashlight beam shook as he scanned the walls. That's when he saw it. A shadow. Not his own. It stretched across the far wall, tall and thin, moving even though he was completely still. He turned sharply, but there was no one there. His throat went dry, his chest tightening with fear. The shadow flickered once, and then began to crawl toward him across the wall. He stumbled backward, his hand knocking against the chair, the sound of wood cracking filling the silence. From the far side of the room, half hidden behind a broken wardrobe, he saw a staircase. It spiraled downward into absolute darkness, like a throat leading deep into the earth. Every part of him wanted to run, but something stronger pulled him closer. He placed one foot on the stairs, then another, each step groaning under his weight. The deeper he went, the colder the air became, until his breath turned white in the beam of his light. At the bottom, he found a door. A basement door. From the cracks beneath it leaked a faint red glow, throbbing slowly, almost like the beat of a heart. His hand shook as he reached for the handle. For a moment, he hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to turn back. But he pushed forward. The door opened with a screech, and he stepped inside. The basement was damp, its stone walls wet with black stains. Rusted chains dangled from the ceiling, swaying gently as if moved by invisible hands. Old crates lined the sides of the room, but at the very center stood something that made his blood run cold, an old mirror. It was tall, framed in cracked gold, its surface fogged and dirty. He took a step closer, then another. His reflection was faint, distorted by the grime. But when he finally wiped it clean, his breath caught in his throat. The reflection staring back was not his own. The glass trembled, tiny cracks spreading like veins across the surface. Then, bang! The mirror split, shattering violently with a sound that shook the basement. He screamed, stumbling back, as from the gaps in the floorboards, blackened hands began to push through. Their fingers were long, sharp, reaching for his ankles, scratching the floor as they tried to pull him under. He kicked free and bolted out of the room, slamming the basement door behind him. Gasping for breath, he found himself in another hallway, one he had never seen before. This hallway was lined with portraits. Dozens of old, painted faces staring at him from the walls. He slowed, his chest heaving. And then, one of the portraits bled. Thick crimson tears dripped from its painted eyes, streaking down the canvas. Another portrait began to bleed. And then another. Soon, every face on the wall was weeping, the red dripping onto the floor, pooling at his feet. The whispers started then. Soft, hushed voices that slithered into his ears. He couldn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable, malicious, mocking, hungry. Panicked, he ran. His footsteps thundered through the hallway, but no matter how far he went, the corridor stretched on endlessly. The portraits twisted, their faces stretching into grotesque smiles, their mouths opening in silent screams. And with every step, he felt it. Something was behind him. Breathing. Following. Waiting. This was only the beginning. He slowed down, gasping, his legs burning with exhaustion. For a moment, the hallway grew quiet. The whispers stopped. The portraits hung still, their faces frozen. He thought maybe he had escaped. But then, he saw it. At the very end of the corridor, in the dim glow of the flickering light, a figure stood. Tall. Motionless. Watching. Its face was pale, stretched unnaturally long, with hollow eyes that burned like dying embers. The boy's blood turned cold. He blinked, and the figure was suddenly closer. Another blink, and closer still. Now only a few steps away. He tried to scream, but no sound left his throat. The lights went out, plunging him into complete blackness. He felt a cold hand grip his shoulder, its fingers digging into his skin. And then, the last thing he heard was a voice, whispering from the darkness. You should never have opened the door. And just like that, the house was silent once again.